Okay, we're gonna do something a little different here. A few days ago, reports confirmed that Disney had an unreleased episode from one of their shows, Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I had been recommended this show by a few friends beforehand, but this being my first real impression of it through clips that managed to resurface online is what prompted me to start watching some more episodes. If you're unaware, Girl and Devil Dinosaur is a Marvel spin-off about a 13-year-old black tech whiz named Lunella who has to fight crime while also having to balance the life of a normal middle schooler. The usual superhero stuff, but with S-tier animation. And the main thought that came to mind, other than marveling at both that and the unfiltered awesomeness of the titular Devil Dinosaur, is that sometimes it's okay to not be subtle. Contrary to what the thumbnail suggests, this video wasn't going to be an explicit review of the show or the episode in question, though I will be using them as a frame of reference throughout this video. Subtext and symbolism are things that frequently get brought up when talking about what makes visual mediums of storytelling work. I also think they've resulted in a cultivation of some bad faith criticism over the years, mainly towards animated media, that I've been wanting to address for a while. When I hear people talking about something being too on the nose, usually they mean talking down to its audience in a way that feels unnecessary. To me, opting to tell a viewer something rather than showing it is at its worst when it's done with a lack of confidence in them that usually comes at the expense of a story or individual scene's emotional authenticity. But I also think a writer being direct with what they're trying to say with themes isn't automatically an indicator of lazy writing. The best way to further explain what I mean by this is by first talking about my favorite animated movie of last year, Nimona. Perfect movie, great send-off to Blue Sky, yada 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 shark. One of the things that made people so positively receptive to it is the fact that many people interpreted its narrative as a queer allegory through the main character. She's not directly established to be trans within the film's text, but her worldview, external struggles, and embracing her identity as a shapeshifter were things that a lot of trans people found to be relatable and latched onto. There's also a lot of visual touches and lines of dialogue that reinforce that reading without saying it outright. I already did a review of this movie when it came out, but if you want a more in-depth analysis of the film through that lens, I recommend a great video essay done by a YouTuber named Aronach that I'll link in the description. I bring Nimona up here because I see the importance of subtlety most frequently being emphasized when talking about how a piece of media conveys its message, which was and is cited as one of the best things about it. A lack of subtlety like that is often regarded by people as the mark of a writer not utilizing the medium to its fullest potential. I don't completely disagree with that line of thinking, but I do think that discussing media from that angle is a lot more complicated than some critics make it out to be. Allusion to ideas and concepts applicable to the real world in animated media that's family friendly generally is done so because the reality and gravity of them being executed in a more straightforward way is risking alienating the people watching, particularly when it pertains to social issues. This is how subcategories of criticism like feminist theory, queer theory, and psychoanalysis emerged in the 19th and 20th century, where academics attempted to analyze and interpret through a specific socio-political lens. It's not limited to film and television either. This comes up all the time in university English courses. So with all that in the back of your mind, what if I were to tell you that Girl and Devil Dinosaur is just as effective as something like Nimona with delivering its messages, even though its approach towards doing so is opposite? I'll start by saying that it's not just because its messages are a net positive for kids. Girl is a very diverse show, with its ensemble cast predominantly being people of color, as well as having multiple LGBTQ characters. Representation on this level is often, if not always, met with intense backlash. And when you look at the rationales of the people instigating that, it's usually something to the tune of forcing it down our throats. Obviously, the majority of these people are acting in bad faith, but I wanted to take a look at an example relatively distant from that to explain why. In the episode entitled Check Yourself, Lunella has to learn a lesson about not being too competitive and obsessed with winning. The first 5 minutes establish this mindset has come at the expense of everyone who's around her on a regular basis, and thus lays the foundation for the circumstances that will make her realize it. She ends up going against this supercomputer in chess that's said to be impossible to beat. Both of them being evenly matched here allows them to bond over shared experiences of victory, generally coming easier for them. The dismissive attitude of Lunella towards the connection LOS 307 tries to form with her, though, causes them to overheat and eventually go rogue by threatening to reveal her identity as Girl and take over the city. The stakes being this high are a direct result of her actions here and allow her to be introspective about taking winning too seriously in a way that aligns with how she's characterized in the opening. This makes labeling the message or show as a whole heavy-handed reductive because it ignores not only the narrative choices that make the journey to get to that point still feel authentic, but also the creative way it's relayed to the viewer. They write original songs to accompany her fight scenes with a dedicated antagonist of each episode to provide a distinct atmosphere. And she plays them on a mixtape, meaning they're implied to exist within the universe and make them feel like a natural fit. I'm not saying it's flawless all the time, time, but it's also not inherently bad because it's unsubtle. This is where it being a Disney show becomes relevant. I think with both animation studios under them using fantastical characters and concepts to convey ideas perceived as universal, proved to be a winning formula that gave them widespread appeal, but also a certain set of expectations. With more grounded in human stories, casual representation is generally the route they've gone for in the past, which is fine in isolation. I don't think every piece of media with underrepresented groups in the cast is under obligation to focus on their struggles. But in the rare case a piece of animated media under Disney does so, they tend to keep it limited to allegory and metaphor. It's important to remember though that not everyone picks up on subtext or is sometimes outright dismissive of it. So when a writer forces their audience to confront an issue directly, it's usually because it's one they want to draw more attention to. The show's also got its fair share of episodes that focus on the internal and external struggles that directly stem from the characters' identities, including the unaired one that focuses on Brooke, who's trans. Everything I said about that 4th episode, though, can be applied to those other ones as well. Lunella's insecurities about her naturally curly hair in episode 5 manifest into the straightened version of it being personified as a villain, only for her to eventually realize that said insecurity is the only thing holding her back from defeating it. Also, this is an example of the people in her life actually being able to help her with these feelings, specifically the women in her family that have dealt with similar setbacks. In the show, it's often done in a light-hearted way, remaining authentic to the difficult reality of engaging with these issues. And in Brooke's case, where there's not really a way to do one without compromising the other, it's still reflective of real life and is done in a way that's engaging. So when I see people who hate this show cite how progressive it is in that context, it reveals the ways in which people can weaponize the concept of subtlety in fiction, attempting to render what different people get out of it as obsolete or reading into it too far, which is proven to come at the expense of what creators are able to make and who it gets to be seen by. They don't seem interested in understanding the how due to an intense fixation on the what. I have to clarify that this doesn't mean that I think it's always okay not to be subtle, nor am I saying that anything, let alone something to come out of Disney, is exempt from critical analysis. But from a general audience perspective, a message being represented or internalized by more people for different reasons is a net positive, especially with media made for kids. Messages that are often limited to adult stories despite it being relevant to their lives and how they understand the world around them. And from a critical perspective, there's other things that should be taken into account when judging those aspects of a story, which isn't something that's limited to one particular type of topic, because there's so much power and beauty in the variety found with how artists tell their stories. With all that being said, go watch Moon Girl, it's fantastic.